God.
Okay. Sanje chedang soje sonam
janju badu dani gapsuchi dagi chanin di pe tokam dolam panju sange jupa sho
sanje
dolam soki chonam la janju badu dani gapsuchi dagi chanin di pe tokam dolam panju sange jupa sho
sanje chedang
dolam soki chonam la janju badu dani dagi chanin di pe tokam dolam panju sange jupa sho
Ayata gade para
Sunjate Bodhisattva.
Dayanta para Sunjate Bodhisattva. Wala so simja 탐제가 또 도자라나 마지막 산제의 고마를 뭐지 진해져 두바자 난 대체도 안 배장 줘서 말라잖아 최초도 나서는 나와는 신고를 신고를 두고 돌아 도저히 좀 마도 와지거든 근데 가서 봐봐도 딱 가자 그래서 전부 시war라에서 준주고 전에 제시 집에 있는 게 있었던지.
And we begin by setting our motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the peerless state of enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings, knowing that to attain that state, we must perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect those trainings in turn, we must have a good understanding of them. And to gain that understanding, we must dedicate ourselves to the study of what they are about. And to be able to be assured that we are on the right path, we need to be able to rely upon an unmistaken presentation. And thus it is that we are here this morning to hear from just such a source, the seminal text of the Bodhisattva's way of life as composed by the great master Shantideva.
아니 남준도 대신전에 아니 소신제 세다를 다디인도 아니 랑게 동게 난가라 뭐랑게 진짜 자외 라마 이발라 나바 탑결라 투제 전부도 되봐 도바샤제 도바 세다 아니 도바샤제 도바디 가서네 셰지 차니 예산용 같은데 아니 가서 예산의 유nhập자가도 두저거 도센나봐 꿀에 추구고 매그 도자서 아니 바지 가서 우주도다 대바치 딱가자 무슨 바코나 동게 난가라 유여상자체 아니 저게 랑게 타가도 제저 마게 심제 탄자 마상원다가 유여상자 라마 투가 뭐디 아니 지오 엄가버 잡아 아마고 투가 홍고 이게 소스타 투가 홍레베서 빠도 매버 저베 신라전레베 이시바 온라다 잡아 젠탄에 이시바 라마 투가 원나바 젠탄테 원래 오출라마 저도 미디어 우제마데 저 답에 이시바 무슨 쉬는 유여상자 어떻게 고마샤.
And as we always do as well, we set up the merit fields in the form of the one of skillful means, Shakyamuni Buddha, in the space in front, who is in fact our own root guru. The figure of Shakyamuni Buddha has one face and two hands. The right hand is in the earth-touching mudra, and the left hand is in the meditative equipoise mudra, holding an alms bowl filled with nectar. The Buddha is marked by the syllables Om at the crown, A at the throat, and Hung at the heart center. From the Hung syllable at the heart center, light rays emanate, going out into the pure realms, inviting the wisdom beings and the empowering deities. The wisdom beings come and dissolve into the central figure, and the empowering deities confer the nectar of enlightenment, some of which overflows at the crown, spontaneously producing the figure of Akshobhya. And we really have the certainty that the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Guru Munindra Shakyamuni Buddha, is really present there in front of us. Similarly, all around, we have the figures of all kind mother sentient beings without exception and all around us.
And Lama to be on body, and because of Kusunto, you and then Tenshibana, what I can judge Raji Watamjala, Shantiwal, the Tule, Tablaki, Kula to the Juba, Nidim of Juba, Penta Mata, Tamjaka doing second. What that, but 대 당분은 또 뭐 상계 좀 당부 정가 내 당부 말하는 것이 chiwa kude jiba chila, ane semjel to tu ke lam la la, nguba soba sanje, ngarazu to tu ke, ngarazu to lamdo, ngarazu to nguba soba sanje ba, wote de ingenchi, yinte ba chi ngotwe ne, wote ni chi kongba she, ane rangi takwa to maja semjel tanje ya, randa kwa kuna so dewa doje, dewa pong, mi dewa dunga rida, dunga chigi chila, chig tune, wata yuan tege che, dede yinba za, semjel tanje dunga juda jawa chana chimaro, jawa juje, jawa shoche, jawa tagi chigi, 대화다 대외 주다 뭐 제가 되나 치모로 대화 주제 대화 쇼츠 대화 다기 책에 대다 채널 너무 두려운 거 진길랍도 소 하나 선제 탐자 가소래 가소다 가자 동네에 대화도 민자나 치모로 민자 주제 민자 쇼츠 민자 다기 대다 채널 너무 두려운 거 진길랍도 소 하스다다 일이 차단을 줘 단위만 치모로 대화 주제 대화 쇼츠 대화 다 대다 채널 너무 두려운 거 진길랍도 소 콤바시
So that we are here now, along with all those sentient beings, recalling the enlightened qualities of an enlightened being, such that they have no fear of suffering in relation to themselves, are skilled in means in removing the suffering of all others, who work towards this purpose without any bias and with a mind of constant great compassion. And they work to benefit others regardless of whether there will be any benefit in return. So these are the qualities of an enlightened being. And we also have an appreciation that the Buddhas don't simply appear, but were like us at one stage as rank beginners. And then they generated the mind of enlightenment for our sake, trained on the path, and for our sake, and developed the state of enlightenment, cultivated the full and complete state of enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. And so we have every trust in what they are doing. And also we have in just really becoming aware of sentient beings all around us, are fully aware of their being bereft of the happiness that they so badly want and being inundated by the suffering that they do not want. And so we think how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. May that be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. So Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. How wonderful if all sentient beings were free from suffering, the cause of suffering. May it be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. So Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. How wonderful if all sentient beings had the happiness that knows no suffering and the excellent bliss of liberation. And may this be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. O Guru Deity, please bless me to be able to make this so. And in order for any of this to take part, we must really work towards how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. And may this be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. O Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. And so as a result of these heartfelt supplications, light rays emanate from the central figure that we have been visualizing and enters into ourselves and all the sentient beings all around us, purifying all of the negativities and obscurations in general that we have accumulated, but in particular dealing with any obstacles or adverse states of mind to our being able to realize the four immeasurable thoughts. And indeed, we are endowed with the special potential to realize fully the full import of these four immeasurable thoughts. And we think this is really wonderful.
and the Lama Tuba Machimil. What are the Jet? That's also Chiga to the subject Tamja and the subject Chiga, and there were Tamja Tabatunga Tamja Java, that Jamatu was similar. What are the negative jet to and you by the Sula Tosina? And Chicasura. Da kacha je ngara zo to je lam lo ngo ba zo san je wo da khong ge cha la tu khong da khong la tu gares na khong ge ani je tu je kham da me wa ba la nye ba chi da wa shin da king ge yo ba yin za an tu je ge ji je ani tu je de la ma ju ba min du sim je de la ma ju ba min du da de le za khong ge ma ji ma zhuo ta me do an ge zhu ba ji ge sam zo gong ba cha.
So we realize how wonderful it is really to have that special kind of blessing, as it were, and potential to really realize the import of the four immeasurable thoughts, not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings. But when we look around and we see really how limited we are in terms of providing all the happiness for all sentient beings and eradicating all the suffering for sentient beings, we can't even do this effectively for one sentient being. But we do know that from the point of view of an enlightened mind, that the Buddha has really developed that mind of enlightenment purely with all sentient beings in focus, and then trained on the path, maintaining that focus for all sentient beings, and then cultivating the full enlightenment state, also with the focus of sentient beings in mind. That he has the all of the understanding of the individual dispositions, the permutations, the karmas, and so on, pertaining to each individual. So it's best able to work towards their benefit. And therefore, it really, we must conclude that I have to also attain that stage of enlightenment in order to be most effective in benefiting sentient beings.
Da de yin ba yin za da ji ge de ge sem jian ne wo da ji ge la ma tu be bu ko mi shi be nga ne da wo ka cha de ji ji ju gu song ji se che wo de che.
So it is with this then, renewed generation of the mind of enlightenment, that we are prepared to listen to some teaching from the Bodhisattva's way of life now.
가서 먼저 잠들 때 봐. 가서 자들 집주 샵게 들어.
디를 그래서 시바 아니 Konchok gave a you ship to darkness.
뭐래. 다 간제 저 로왔던 거라 저기 저 가서래 Konchok다 되자다 세단 되게 랑게 생겨랑실라 다 수요 말때 이나야 배랑실라 수원에 진짜 토바 매반의 고바 수성보 여바 인자고 저 가서래다 콘조데 마게바 소발라 그 십도 제 삼럽다네 십도 다 배전지 맞는 용투고 매바 인자 와다 디세다 십어 콘조 게베 주 십도 다네 그다 콘조 쓰는데 그 귤에 땡겨 여바 인자 아니 귤다 깨를 땡겨 여바 인자 아니 그 규겐데 십도 거쳐 아니 도데 깨래 깨다 틀에 개치지데 견제지 유이 소어드 가르샤 등 십도 배 거쳐 받지 아니 대자 그 Konchok 되게 교육 봐 하고도 아니 디 규대 막아봐도 Konchok 가두고 매봐 인자 아니 교가는 아니 제부 다 탑시요 말 그래서 제부디 교육 제조 장교도 유마상 매봐 있는 제부디 아니 라수고 용 되게로 근데 임바 인자 다 Konchok 규대 막아도 그 제부디 용사 매봐래 그 로아 용사 매봐라 어다 되면서 시바 Konchok 이게 주십도 다네 뽕을 배봐라 송사 아니 Konchok 게베 유기 예와 지된 바체 로다 유기 예와 지된 바 미도 바체 발라 Konchok 데 가바 되베 게체 발라 Konchok 가바체 로다 원들지 거서도 숨고는 마치시 자자 원들지.
And so we have arrived at a point in chapter 6 where we're looking at the fourth main outline, which is in a detailed analysis, looking into the causes of the causes that give rise to anger, and as a result of this, then we will make an effort to abandon anger. And so this is a very crucial outline, because we are, very much influenced or dominated by attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And even though these mental afflictions are not of the nature of mind, but simply because we are so habituated to thinking in those ways since beginningless time, that they have such influence over us. And so it's kind of like really so important that we engage in this kind of detailed analysis to really research the causes and conditions that give rise to anger. And by recognizing it, and then we can put a stop to the causes of anger, because it's that if we are able to deal at the causal stage, then we don't have any worry of any resultant anger arising. And so that's a very important point here. And this main outline is divided into 3 subheadings. The first is a general look at the divisions or classifications of the objects that give rise to anger. And then looking at putting a stop to anger that arises when the undesirable occurs. And then putting a stop to anger when we are prevented from fulfilling our desires. And so the first of these points then was a general look or general division or classification of the objects that give rise to anger. And verse number 11 begins this process. For myself and for my friends, I want no suffering, no disrespect, no harsh words, and nothing unpleasant. But for my enemies, it is the opposite. And so this looks into the degree to which we are kind of like a suffer now for ourselves or for our friends, for our relatives, that if another harms us or them, then we are going to feel suffering. It may be in terms of the actual pain that we have to endure, they have to endure, or loss that they have to endure, And then maybe, the harsh speech or slander or degradation that we may have to suffer to our face, or a sense of infamy, that where our reputation is wrecked due to others, and all of these are the unwanted, the undesired, and this is these can be the causes or the objects of the generation of anger, and we want the opposite of those, the four opposites. That we want that pleasure, we want that gain, we want that reputation, we want that praise. And for our enemy, of course, we want the opposite. We want them to feel the loss and the infamy, the degradation and the pain.
다들 타도는 가서나 녀다 되게라 안에 대화 뒤에 동에 미디어에 되게 되는가 타도는 가서나 란진들아 도 되기도 와. 다 디녀디 쇼게녀 이네 건다 녀 많이 받쳐서나 야들 독초도 되게 되기도 와. 그러와 다 동에 되게 되더라 대화 되게 되고도 와. 좋아. 강사 찍고 지자래. 다 타도사다 란진들아 도 되도. 그러와 란진들아 란라 도 되도 와. 란체바스베 첸질라 투테도와 티자 녜녜인자 안텔라 야부시 고그레 두자 고그 말에 선자치 요거도 그러와 다 셔바 잘라서가 오나 녜녜 말에 텔라 두가 중나 지기도 네 대화 중나 지기도 선자치 다 탈도서다 란체즈다 투데기도.
You can see this kind of bias that we have, where we want only happiness for those that we approve of, that we are friendly with, and that for the ones that we are not friendly with, the enemy and so on, we are not moved in any way should they suffer, and we don't want them to have good things happening, and if bad things happen for them, that's okay. We feel that. Now, the kind of like the person may be the same here. And so it's really what's dictating our attitudes here is our self-cherishing. And so it's my friends, and therefore that's what I want them to have every good. And self-cherishing is the one dictating that. And then for those that are outside of that circle, you really don't care if they are feeling bad or are suffering ill fortune. And that's the same sort of thing, that's the self-cherishing attitude again at play. And so really that the fault in each of those cases there is the self-cherishing attitude.
And delay talk short to the Kansa Chiwachian, the Koti Yon take it. And the Kari to the Koranch is the only Yon take it. Ranch is the only Yon take it. What did they?
So the person who may be your best friend in the morning and you want every good for them, that person may turn into your enemy by the evening, and then if bad happens to them, you are in no way at their side or supporting at all. And so the person is the same. It's your attitude, the self-cherishing, that is dictating these attitudes.
No, and Tagani that to talk to Tagari, Shoget dying it, what that Yen Chasuna, that talk to the Tigua. Shoget to you, but there were Yagacha to you, Mate, Gondati, Gasa the Yagacha the Dugan Chatigua.
And so it can be the opposite as well, of course. The enemy can be the one in the morning where you can't approve of anything that they do. And then by evening, they are your friend and you're fawning all over them. And so that is the self-cherishing attitude there.
That in the image, Marazo Pichida, so leg on gay, Pama Pinja, the Jomo, and the younger, in a dinner the Tawa Yabushayata, sometimes you watch younger that tea, same J in Betum Senki. There what did you to me to in Betum Senki? And how don't do Tapena or Chinchima marking a Simjet and said Tare, Rangi leg on gay, and that you bring Pija, Jomo, Sazala, so Karichon, or leg on the Jordan, and Tilla Chiki. 그래서 야고지 중으로 지나 상사 정말 이마이나 그 교자미도 와 교자 연구문도 와我다 고저 교자 연구문도 와 다디지도 아니 셈자 소라이네 거 용하지 그러 한 대화도지 동네 밑에 봐 이제 좀 제도 전에 그러 아니 토마메가 진짜 막게 이제 좀 제전 다 셈자 소이네 지버려 봐 내가 소소라 펜도겐지 내자 내가 소소라 뇌기겐지 내자 오고 내가 지고 지장 대도도 오다 먼저 삼로드 뒤톤에 레바이나 아니 너무 좀 망고 지금 장수가 가능하지 용으로 와
And of course here, you know, that due to our karma, karmic connections, we have a natural sense of closeness with our parents and our siblings and our relatives and so on. And so that's perfectly fine and that's good. But what we need to expand into is simply, calibrating our attitudes based on the other simply being sentient being. That if you are a sentient being, I afford you the courtesy of wishing for your happiness and wanting to remove your suffering, because we are aware that that is foundational in all sentient beings' well-being. And so this is what we need to do, and to also understand, like to have it as a premeditated fact in our mind that all sentient beings are incredibly kind-hearted. And so I should respond accordingly in their company. And so can be no criticism in that sense, that we have this sense of natural closeness to our relatives, but to extend that courtesy to all sentient beings is what's really important, because why? They want happiness and do not want suffering. And so it's kind of like, you know, we have the same eagerness to help a friend, to help an enemy, as we have towards a friend, and that to understand that the one harming us is simply wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, in the same way as a dear friend.
我在中间第团的大的呢，或中间第他几个、二个、三个，俺刚上阵那个，俺个这个让数跟牛切的，过来，我当不这个上头当人家叫我贴着都用过嘛是吧？我说不过群众这了，俺不过群众这了可，这个把家也拉对，俺个把家也拉个样马里头，样拉个里头，经常大家呢，当俺这个。 너무 도서는 랑 전전에 공부 숙청부 유견지 안다 다른 대과 산재를 쳐다 제는 대과 준비 쳐다 제네 아니 된대게 로정 거 냠내 제네 다 당번에 비다고 싶은 거 같아 거 삼로지 니당 야 몰람자 규제 법장자 둘라 W setup 아니 저거 가서데 양라도 뭐 멘저자 뭐 피는 초사 진장자 양 삼로당 양 규제 법장자 양 강도도 삼로당 검자 어디서 당번에 비다고 용거 또또만 가서 다다 마요 용거 때 이내야 뭐 좋아 남자 뭐 쳐봤잖아 양 강도도 그야 지 가서데 대과집에 쳐다 투베가 삼로당 다 용다를 배준잖아 그 마치 리기를 야랑 야랑이네 시잖아 부구 충족者공부자에 납도 그 남자 공부하고 잡신 말아 마치 리기를 양 갈리 야랑야 라바다 야랑 집으로 와 같은데 쟤는 아니 그 남신아 그 공부 탁탁탁탁 잡두고 정부도 와 진짜지 말아 삼로들 다가랑 남신아 다들 공부 검지 좀 사도 아니 그 랑슈가 삼로당 투에지 용투로 왔다 아니 솔라이네 잠바데 니제 검도 내가 솔라 팬도 왔다 너바기 개바가야 매게 셈제 이베스라 잠바데 니제 못une 대대 딜레 대화 주나 가보 용게 동네 주나 미트바 용게 랑슈가 용투에지 네 이메일 맞도록 다 대화 되게 동네 밑에와 임제 뒤 때문에 봐 아니 편바 주에 중앙 있나
So, how do we approach this kind of teaching, this kind of reasoning? It's we really have to make it into a very close habit in our minds, not just to go through it once or twice or 3 times, but to really make it so that it starts to become really spontaneous in our thoughts. It is first thought, that these sentient beings, they are deserving of happiness. They don't deserve any suffering. It's my responsibility. I want to provide that happiness for them. I want to remove that sense of suffering for them, regardless of what they bring to the table. And so it's like, say at the moment we are rank beginners. We are like that small child who is just about trying to learn to walk, to just reach that stage. And you can see how shaky they are, when they get up, wobbling all over the place, falling down again, slowly getting up again, starting again, trying to make one step, holding onto something, and so on. And so we are like that because we are completely dominated by the three poisonous minds of attachment, aversion, and ignorance that we have had on our continuum since beginningless time. And so it's no wonder we are like this small child trying to really learn how to walk in the Dharma. And so it's kind of like we have met with the Buddha Dharma, we have met with the Mahayana teachings, we have an affinity towards the mind training teachings. We need to familiarize ourselves with every single kind of advantage that we possibly can, such as, really reading up on these teachings, taking to mind what really appeals to us and how to kind of like set our mind, using aspirational prayers, mantra, descending nectar light meditation, using the purification techniques, the accumulation of merit techniques, and every possible kind of advantage or asset that we have in the teachings to slowly turn this great ship around of our negative mind into a positive, a virtuous attitude. And so that, we can, like that child trying to learn to walk, it's constantly falling down, but gets up again, has another go. We are the same. We will forever be falling down, but never kind of stop. Just make sure that you get back on your feet again. And soon you will be walking confidently in the Dharma. And that's what you want to do. And soon your adjustment of your mind and your being able to skillfully pick the right thing to say and do will be automatic for you. And then you will start to kind of really dissolve the distinctions between, how you behave towards those who benefit you and those who harm you. You will see no difference in them. Because you're operating under the basis of they're wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And they are kind of like deserving because of that particular basis.
What 안 디가데 가서도 지금 주주 가서 권에 개와민도 삼조로 오다 지 가서도 지금 쪽보지 지 용주와 tenge를 선서 어디 저와 가야 매대 쪽보지 용거를 선서 저와 가야 매대 다 주주 가서 권에 개와민도 디 donda tembarisha tele 제토와 이나 meaningful이샤 티고 미지 찍네와 개반에 개바보다 제우전 되게도 삼상 왔다 된데서 려동 제고를만도 오다 뒤주 충주지를 교시고 태그를 써서 니마 가셔 제 알로 가셔 저 깔레를 저 아니잖아 제보 중모서는 어떤 민도서는 이단 제조에 좋은 되기도 어떤 데 맞잖아 오다 뒤 제일 좀제도 문도 때 좀제도는 오다 개반에 개바거나 저기도 내가 민도 삼사잖아 가봤다니 죽고 했죠.
And so please, we need to work on this, and also to please give yourself time to be doing this. Do not hope for automatic results here, really quick kind of results. Just to make sure that you are aware of how meaningful this approach is, how incredibly meaningful it is to be working on this kind of mind training as it is. And so, don't just even look at it in terms of a one life project, but from eon to eon, that you will dedicate yourself to this. And again, don't avoid the idea of the kind of push button enlightenment of wanting it to happen straight away. And then when it doesn't, you become despondent and despair and give it all away. But rather to make sure that you dedicate yourself for the long haul here, and that you will kind of slowly see improvement.
가서 먼저 갑래 지금 가서래 지금 남배처럼 이완을 쳐 오다 지금 문에는 오다 야고 쇼도 삼사체 아니 소소 남바체 아니 lok하셔 지금 슈갑사도 아니 조아시라 마저 오 다들 쳐샤 미도 삼사체네 이 추를 처음에부터 말이다 얘네 랑이 지단게 마당하체네 아니 간다서는 sem주 차대도 또 연구도 또 용되기도 먼저도 당부 차도 오 시부 가서 그 뒤에 통도지라 시부 용해라 와카르와다 대대 가와 가서나 상계발에 아니 지금 소람내 고치는데 계제 담에 송 세고 봐 근데 레라고 지 가와요래 아니 네가 나라도 그래 장주 년쪽 넘버다 빠지게 야만에 장주쌤 쯤만 빠지 계속 되는 거 좋아시고 정말 못 너도 레당 보러 가요 말봐 근데 매겐 지금 아니 세대 친화식 뭐 세대라 작성 출신 뭐 요게 지금 아니 갈래지 나가지네 세대다 제일 저대 시부시부 누가 줘야 말봐 시부시부 누가 요 말이야 다 년종 삐딱보지 걔는 년종 주마만 입었음 장주가 쌤 주마만 입었음 돈이 또 배셔라서 어때네다 그 사주 시부시부래 아니 먼저 된대 삐딱보 마신 게 지금 아니 다 쳐라 몇번 더 줘야 되게 아니 지금 영화를 또 쳐야 되겠지 아니 소소가 르마게 아니 줘봐도 또 지금 로직니 다와 가셔 로직니 로카셔 저 삐딱보래 딱 강투도 제가 삐딱보 간시다 강투도 지금 남주도 민다와 어쨌든 되네 그 로카셔 좋았게 수셔보게 되게 말봐 그래서 그 년중 것은 말씀은 주마만이 말씀 장주 것은 주마만이 말씀은 헛가 교화식 좀부터 대가요 말이야 아니면 다들 죄들은 누가 시험도 삼단 근데 처럼 누가 말단 알아서 굉장히 마당하러 와 아니 되게 다 삼로가 터네 어디 제들라 좀새도 계속 다니 쳐보다가 기부터 봐서 뒤냠내 제 하나 좀 냠내 제 나와데 고급 상부 삼사다 다티 개바도 봐도 냠슬라면 랑이 삼사제도 근데 저 려다 왔다와는 아니 규르고 거기 말해 규르고 거기 말해
So it's about really, setting the right tone for ourselves. It's very, very important. That what we really have to avoid is kind of like, and maybe, we were all a little bit really excited at the beginning when we first came across the Buddha Dharma and this tradition and so on, and became, very inspired and kind of like expected, big results very, very quickly, and then, then when they didn't come about, and then we made a kind of like a negative judgment on the teachings themselves, that these don't work. So we have to, really understand that the person who is the Buddha worked for 3 countless great eons to purify every negativity, to perfect every good quality in order to manifest complete enlightenment. And so from our side, our point of view, we are trying to generate, attitudes of mind like the mind of enlightenment, in a non-artificial way, to generate a sense of renunciation unartificially, and to gain a very profound and subtle insight into the wisdom realizing emptiness. These are very important and profound topics of understanding. And so we need to take a long-term approach to being able to generate such sincere understanding, such powerful understanding. And therefore, we need that aspirational mindset. We need to be able to, yes, rejoice in how fortunate we are to be able to meet with these teachers. It's not just a question of, having some progress and, dedicating ourselves in body and speech for a few months, and doing a big intensive retreat or something, and then afterwards, you don't see the results, and therefore you discount the teachings themselves. And so you don't fail to see that it's your own fault. You didn't have the right tone. You didn't have the right way of setting your mind at the outset, because you didn't realize the full import of what you were getting into. And so it's just what we need to do to kind of like really see how fortunate I am to be in this position, to have met with the Dharma, to have met with the Mahayana tradition, to have such amazing teachings at my disposal. And I see how crucial it is. I see where I am in my own as a beginner, on the path. So I am willing to put in effort for eons if necessary. I'm dedicating myself for the long term, and in order to really give these teachings a chance. And therefore, if I do that, if I have that sort of big-minded approach, long-term approach, the actual results I am looking for will not take so long.
뒤쪽 가서 거라 건 내가 면도서 소소 삐다고 가요고 제바이나 아니 그 제보디 그 하요 말이야. 당고 저기 유디 삐다고 주바도 인자 아니 제보디 아니 가서는 다 포스폰제 되고 얼마 남자 유거 말 제보디 포스폰스래 뒤쪽 봐 장을린다는 거지. 지금은 가서 모두 유디 딱다 좀 상금해서 뭐 나라도 배선이 유야고지 삐다고 용해는 배선제 아니 디 타침바게 아니 저기 제보들랑 먼저 왔다 저거래와 자고 말이 유등 먼저 삐다고 좀 더 봤잖아. 아니 제보 유거든 삐다고 상황이만 디 인가들 제보 탁 연거다 디 계진이 발라. 그러와 어제 유들 배주 맞아자 아니 제보들 레와 숙성 맞아도 아니 간사선의 생주 차대 용대도.
And so again, like this maybe there is a natural tendency in the deluded mind, to say, oh, if I, make a big short burst at this particular thing, I will be able to succeed in it. And we have that sort of attitude towards the Dharma. And so that's really not the way to go, because you kind of like get disillusioned too quickly in that way. What we need to focus on, and really the only aspect of it that we need to focus on, is that what I am doing is meaningful. And when what I am doing is meaningful, and I have really accepted that as meaningful, time is no longer an issue. What I am doing is meaningful, that's good enough. And we don't have to have these big expectations of results. If what you are doing is meaningful and you're laying down the causes, you are doing your best, then the results will look after themselves, and that you're putting in the effort. You are not kind of like giving that much attention to expectation, but you are always, what you're doing is instilled with that meaningfulness, and that's good enough. Time is not an issue.
어디를 대인자 가자데 가술래 저기 가서 님도 마셔봐치에 아니 대야 뒤주 통도질을 내버지는 배 뒤로 가서 권한 내가면도 어디 가서 뒤 제대로 좀 전에 말이야 뒤면도 탑시 셈민도 탑시 셈 해봐 인자 어다 대랑 제국도 선다 아니 뒤 제게 아니 전쟁상 개견의 잡아 근데 지금도 어다 뒤전 아니 뒤주라 또 봐봐 어다 뒤 개침부 입었자 어저 간사서는 가라서 릭치게 규르보 갈아간다면 진짜는 왔다 야 심주에 또 차들이 좀 되기도 와.
And so to look on it like to have that sense of courage of mind, that's really quite important. However long it takes, it doesn't matter to me that I know I am doing the right thing. I have the right approach, the right tone to my life, and that I'm doing the best I can. And also, you have that understanding. There is no alternative, actually. There is no alternative. If we want that sense of improvement, if I'm really sincere about wanting to benefit sentient beings, this is the way to go about it. And to kind of like really, all we need to do is pray that we have all the conducive conditions to match with that sense of courageous effort that we have already dedicated towards the path. And so when it comes to doing the Dharma, what is it that is practicing the Dharma? It is the job of opposing mental affliction. So that we need not to encapsulate it in any kind of more broader sense. It is that which is opposing the mental affliction. And so the second subheading there was the putting a stop to anger when the undesirable occurs. And this has three subheadings of its own. The first is putting a stop to anger when someone does us wrong. And secondly, putting a stop to anger when somebody does our friend or relative wrong. And thirdly, putting a stop to anger that arises when something good happens for our enemy. So that sense of resentment, of jealousy. And that, this is again, looking into things in the way we have this ordinary view, ordinary sense that we are offended when somebody does harm to our circle of friends or our loved ones. And we can rejoice when an enemy, experiences this misfortune. And so in that same context, then we get angry. We kind of like really do not like it when they get on well. And so there are further divisions then that in that first one there, that putting a stop to anger when somebody does us wrong has two different divisions. One is the applying of patience in response to the generation of suffering. And secondly, again, the applying of patience when we experience disrespect or abuse. And the first of these has 3 points as well. So this applying of patience when suffering is generated. And the first of these is the patience, really familiarizing with the patience of accepting suffering. Secondly, familiarizing with the
我这他当不得了，送在东岸当多两百说法讲，出来你这个说法，那就来几年不中，他当不得了，东岸当那个说法得了俺讲呢，他不了，这上届东岸给让先两马点吧上吧，我说操，上届让先上届的东岸给让先两马点吧上吧，东岸公边他偏于上吧讲，搞呢点米个我上吧，牛毛帮我了百万偏于。 아니 가서도 동네 거에 편유 개발 셔봐 어쩌고 뭐다 subject 어떻게 할로 할로
What happened?
That's okay.
He knows internet has some problem, yeah?
Yeah, okay, no problem.
So,
Yeah. Listen.
that's not,
I think so. Listen. What? Kogudo? Si Kogudo? Hello?
Kogudo again.
Kogudo. What I done that till Tango de la Tunga, Tanang, Soba Combatella, Soba Combatella, Nachene, and the Casa de Saja Tunga Granche, Liamateva Sambasa, that the day by the Tunga Yongres, Tunga Gombe Payuch Sambacha. Rada Payu Samba, come not 10 megawatt Samba, Yomo Power la Peba Payu. 아니 동네 공배 편유 개발 시험하잖아. 왔다 sab정가 거나 소리지.
And so with regard to the first, again, going back to there, which is familiarizing with the patience of accepting suffering, that has 5 subheadings to go with it as well. Again, these are the nature of contaminated suffering means that we cannot get beyond it. We do not get beyond it. Secondly, the benefits of meditating on suffering. And thirdly, reflecting at nothing does not become, there's nothing that does not become easier through familiarization. Fourthly, the benefits of really striving to abandon the mental afflictions. And fifthly, that a more extensive explanation on the benefits of really familiarizing with suffering.
What the legend, Takaja, Tambutilla, Takaja, Tambutilla, that's Saja to make a ranchi in Bayinzasa, Rotakala to Saja Pumbutan, the good to make a ranchi in Basambata, Takaja, Casola. To me, Yimba, watching it, a quadilla, Magiba the Maga, that Chen Barbata, watch on to make the Tata Cheguyorwa. Was it a church go to Derwa? Casana Narazo, Sacha Yawal, Yana Yam the Land Devayina, quite Sacha Yellow put to make a ranching in Bayinza, and come Mutin to my younger days. And the example didn't dare get Sacha Yellow put the carrot and the younger son, and T. Casa de Dati Caso de Lela Ten Yonguto, that Yomoto Sula Ten Yonguto, T. and Cabato Modestan, and that Rota Cajaja. Doesn't Marie Balaten Yongo and T. Yomotami to Bishara Combo to start church, you said Tilatoro. That way you do, and Coaching Cocaso de Coca de Coranji, Yabashara, Codilla Casola, Magiba Jagoyum says Yomar, what in the channel. What they do as a Tisumur, that is a Saja to make a ranchi, the Mateva, the Sumnet, to Mela Mateva Sumnet, the Tawale, the regional language to make you a Shinto Mansa, Sawaticha.
So the first of these 5 is the fact that the contaminated is in the nature of suffering, and so we do not get beyond that. And so this is really referring to the 5 aggregates, the 5 contaminated, appropriated aggregates, and that to say what has given rise to these aggregates of body and mind. It is the karma and the mental afflictions, the attachment, aversion, and the ignorance, that ignorance of self-grasping, and then saying, well, because their cause is contaminated, or sorry, is afflicted, then we're going to have to expect suffering with these contaminated aggregates. And so it's kind of like the reasoning is that there's no sense in disliking the suffering and rejecting the suffering that we experience, because these contaminated, appropriated aggregates are in the nature of suffering itself. And so the verse number 12, the first 2 lines point this out. The causes of happiness sometimes occur, but the causes for suffering are very many.
That's subject of Pumbuchado, that any deviation in the language of the Sinwar, and the core Nasa, Rota, core said that Maru Sergeant Yawa Level Pumbayana Yando, and going to the because of too much of a land at the course of it was so course and several logical Yaman. That's Sergeant Yawal, don't get no to a Pumbuti, Yana Yando Leadilla, and course of Yorwa, Corvascon, don't get. No chicken Punguti and Dash Yani Yando Soso Caso de Yani Yandota, Ramama Lentela, Cosby Yorwa. There's a corner, the way June, that one. The Dangarazo Murzi, there were something Murzi, 다 동네에 따라 로타 간자지 레다 간자지 나라 쪽에 다 지게 다 대외 주는 랭가 줘서 대외 로다 랭가 주나 동네에 주는 신도 레다 간자 대외 용의 주주에 까브레 잡면도 다 용 동네에 주는 신도 망보 영어 자가 줄에 되는 거다 제보도 용되고 그래서 아니 신도 망외서 코어라시 대화 코에 라신 딜레마도 코어 코랑 다 라신 추니 딜레마 돼 버렸어. 근데 이봐서 그 동네 무트는 용되기로 왔어.
And so here it's like really it is pointless to dislike the suffering that arises from that which it is natural with, the contaminated aggregates that we are living with. And the reason why it's so pertinent here is, of course, that from that dislike, of course, arises then, the frustration and the anger that we are trying to counteract. And so it's looking into it and saying, because the nature of that which is contaminated is going to be the nature of suffering. And that, really, when we talk about cyclic existence is nothing other than the continuous round of the rebirth again and again of these appropriated, contaminated aggregates going around from one life to one life to one life, going around and around and around like that. It's called a round. And, this is what it's like the word means, in fact, that this is the nature of cyclic. This is what cyclic existence is. It's continuous rebirth with these contaminated, appropriated aggregates that are in the nature of suffering. Therefore, don't be shocked that you are going to suffer, and therefore don't dislike it. You have to have a better attitude to come to the table with in response to it, because, and we have, as it says in the verse there, is sometimes moments of happiness, but also so much more common is the experiences of suffering. And this is simply a result of the karma that we have accumulated. If we have, we only experience the results of that, of the causes that we have created. And so obviously there's a lot more causes for suffering than there is for happiness.
로다 가자 콘로다 셰당다 되샤다 란첸젠다 다저 뭔가 말이벼 온게 아니 저기 란체바 전에 아니 샬라녀게다 왔다 되지 뭐 저랑 수고지 용되기도 와 용되기도 다들 갈 거배 온게 용되기 요래 다들 아니 라래 동네 직 저거 동네 샤바 정도 나기 되게 다 샬라녀바 잡아라 수고 되게 아니 저 가서도 주사도 거 견다 차오도 저거도 용되기도 와 왔다 되게 용되기 요래 다들 동네래. 다만 이제 교회 동네 다 말아도 그 대화 좀 뭐 증거 요다. 얘네야 지금 동네 찍뭐 매바차네 동네 집 매바차네 동네 შემ바치 야 고추온데 아니 고추온데 당고때 먼저 대화 좀 뭐 증거 요래. 그 앞에나 차차바나 시부지 차소나 먼저 차로 따오나 아니 그 차베 동네데 마 매바차도 다 아니 차로 따오데 다 내가 전에 기부를 열어봐. 그래서 이나야티 사회 동네 그 고추온 거 열어봐. 이나 나랑도 단다데 디디 소리는 거 진짜 열어봐. 아니 그러 사고 차도 어다데 뭐처럼도 어디 동네도서도 야 살로도 마세제 장로지 땅도 양고 가서래 카드도 단다데 동네 집 사회 동네도 마 시사 장로 동네 가서 장로 땅어데 아니 거기 기부 나와를 차온 것도 와. 난 간장서도 뭐 장기도 양마 세는 분들이 뭐다. 그래서 동네 지금 마시네 동네 셔바지 고추에 가서 차상 셀롱아 맞자다. 고추도 고추하러다. 뒤바저도 먼저 대화를 줬다. 교회 동네 텐데질 먼저 대화를 뭐 했은 거다. 그 동네 차도 교회 동네 쓰게. 어떻게 했다. 잡아 두제가 동네 쓰는데는 그 텐데 동네 그 몇 풍부디 안에 양들 해야 될다. 잡아주는 것도 이제 문제잖아. 동네에 맞아서 차대기도 한가. 얘네 다 말아서 뛰어서 뛰죠. 뭐네. 딜라 때문에 뒤도 대화를 주서 대화를 해서 삼사치. 대화를 해서 어떻게 저 무슨 대면도 그 대화 생이 상화되면 누가. 대화 생이 상하지 않으면 누가 다 돼서 코코라 지금 가서 대 저다 제가 친히 상황이 매번 인상도 왔다 되게 되는 거다 같이 지금 딜라되는 마가 왔다 아니 콘도사네 다 처음에 되겠지 어다디 코라라시 코라 되게 아니 그 되고 뭐더라 딜레 탓답 가도 어때네다 지금 타바다 탐제 잡아 주베서 아니 배주 땅도는 다 개바세기로 와 어때 다들 콘도사 마기 받잖아 딜레 동네도 무트는 영화 유튜브 되고도 뭐다 동네 매번 잘 교차가 와
And so it's clear in terms of really assessing the causes that might give rise to happiness versus the cause that gives rise to suffering. And we can see just in the course of a normal life that it's clear that there are so many causes laid down for suffering because of the prevalence of how much suffering is experienced. And this is no surprise when we consider how much we are dominated by anger, aversion, ignorance, etc. The self-cherishing attitude that we have, that selfishness, and most specifically the ignorance of self-cherishing. We can see there that others harming us is cause of our suffering. The suffering that's simply just part of living, and that's how one suffering kind of leads to another, like they're passed on from like a relay, and that we have that sort of understanding of this suffering that's kind of continuous in a way. And this is just the suffering and pain we experience mentally and physically. But then there's the suffering of change, which we often so eager to mistake as happiness. But it's really only how the brief moment when one suffering subsides a little bit, and before the next suffering arises again. And so there's so many examples of this. You can see that if we are feeling cold in the house, we recognize that's a suffering. Then we turn on the heating to heat the place up, and after a while we experience that brief fleeting moment when it's comfortable for us with the right temperature. But then before long it gets too hot, and then we have the suffering of it being too stuffy and hot, so we have to turn the heating down or off again. And then we kind of like before long start to experience the suffering of cold coming in again. And so it's like that in life, it's kind of like constantly like that. And we kind of like mistake this as happiness, but it's really the suffering of change. And then of course there's pervasive suffering, the suffering that is endemic simply because we have again taken on these contaminated aggregates of body and mind. And that's this is kind of like this guarantees really that there can be no fully qualified happiness in this state of cyclic existence, and that therefore to simply have this blanket attitude of dislike and distaste of suffering is only going to exacerbate our situation and lead to a continuation of suffering, where the question we should be asking is, how can I be liberated completely from this kind of constant litany of sufferings? So that's really what we need to analyze and research into. How can I gain liberation? How can I attain the full and complete enlightenment?
我等等多大等的因为因啥或这个是我等的人但本来小小那个做的本来但这个当代怎么来了的高边哪啥的有的当代哈的有的那你心里的话的高边刚才真的long down节的刚刚这个是我上这个碰过因为因啥碰过的아니 걔 나자 되다 태원데 아니碰过的나온 거因为因啥아니 거저 록다운 제거에 당 quarantine 제거도 내주 딜 차와라 그래서 그 상식을 풍부디 뭐 이자 그 동네를 풍부이 뭐 인자 그 용되게 열와 왔다 된대래 다 될래 뭐 인자 왔다 디가 딜 때는 뭐저 딜 막아봐 가서 다 딜라 때네 다 동네 연구도서는 아니 컨트롤사 마기 받잖아 마유 받잖아 아니 디다 연구 받대 뭐네 쟤는 왔다 동네 연구를 왔대 그 사실 공부를 왔어 뭐네 쟤는 다 내가 동네 뭐야라 가지고 도서는 다그 아니 교가르샤 째잖아 아니 디 교대 가와이나 아니 된데 동네 그 공부도 마중와이나 마중와 임바이나 아니 동네도 연구 말아 그 로아
So, there's a very obvious example of this kind of suffering that we have to endure in the kind of reference to the COVID pandemic that is ongoing, and that that is affecting us, affecting our bodies, giving us that virus, that sickness, because of our having these contaminated aggregates. And so that all this lockdown that results from that, and all the restrictions and so on, and inconveniences are all a result of the fact that we're living in a suffering reality with suffering contaminated aggregates. And so it's kind of like saying that, and then on top of that, if we so dislike and get frustrated because of all this and because of all this suffering, it's kind of, you're going against the nature of the thing. And that's also, not helpful. Above all, it's not helpful. And one has to adjust one's attitude to say, look, I'm here in this situation with these contaminated aggregates. Suffering is to be expected. There's no way around it in terms of to be expected. But if I am serious about not wanting suffering, I have to focus on the causes that give rise to suffering and eradicate those causes. Therefore, the results of suffering will not manifest because the causes have not been accumulated.
라 매스긴데 치기도 그러와 먼저 매그 치기도 쓰는 먼저 컨트롤 되게 말와 nga라서 매라 삽삽 치기로 매그 치기도 다서 삽삽 치기로 와 삽삽 전에 매코란 게 배주 가래 땅 거나 먼저 배주 땅 거로 와 추에 되는 시로 와 그러와 다가는 이제 롱이나 다가리 마 중학이 가리데 코란 게 양코 지금 랑신 딜라파네 코란 뇌에 지어와 안 딜라 먼저 뇌고 도스는 컨트롤 되게 말와 다 같이 그래서 어떤 콜라 삽삽 치기로 와 아니 삽삽 전에 코란 배주 가래 땅 거도 먼저 땅 거로 와 어다 된서 코 랑신데 심바체네 아니 딜라 마가바 마체바체네 아니 코란 게 아니 마가바 마체바체네 코란 배주 강요 받다 코 땅도 마체바이나 아니 코 뭐이 내서 투바와 안 돼서 먼저 지금 풍부 딜렌다도 코 도면 나서 가지고 그래 그래서 먼저 코아 봐라 코아데 동에 그러셔 코아스는 동에 여자 코아 봤어 그러와 로와 근데 인자 코아스는 코 동에 그러셔 너 동에 연구했어 딜레트 맞죠 딱 가르쳐서는 동에 여바도 신고 여대 동에도 믿어 봐 있나 아니 동에인데 요가르셔 째저다 동에도 방답 제지 방답 두다 뭐도 다 방답 매바 이나는 거 탑시 여마 딩결을 쳐봐서 걔들 쥐어서 여는 딜라 메가 제지면서 걔들 쥐어서 여는 안 딜라 메가 제고 거 쥐어나 지기로 왔습니다 걔들 쥐어서 매는 딜라 메가 제지면서 딱 탑시 매바 이나는 거 탑시 여마래 그 마가 저를 배면도 디 가서 딩야마기 가서 대 사님한테 먼저 시작하는 시점은 어느 뒤삼도 당한다고 마가 제거 해야 되는 거죠 탑시 여마는 탑시 되지 그 마가 맞지 그 탑시다 그 가서는 뭐이 내주 투바잖아 강해세에 뭐이 내주 투바잖아 대화 주변에다 동네세 지구로마도 그 생거처럼 마가와자 컨트롤산을 평가만 도와 그 탑시다 그 뭐이 내주 투바 제는지만 그때 뭐이 내주 투바잖아 그 미조당을 와 미스는 남주 여자 남주들한테 뭐이 내주 가르칠 때 안되다 좀 좋아이나 그 미조당 차대요 딱 뭐이 내주도 뭐든 봐 삼로 당와이나 그래서 미인세네 딱 미조당을 차대고 요 말을 봐 좋았다. 그래서 공무원 내수 투바토치 예측부터 어디 숨고였다.
So this is the way in which we need to respond to every problem that arises in whatever way it arises for us. That we have to see the reality of that problem. This is absolutely crucial. This is key And therefore we can apply the right response when we see the reality. We can see that, that dislike and anger are not necessary when we see the reality of the situation. We can see that it's like looking into fire. We know that the nature of fire is to burn. And so we don't get angry at the fire, do we? Because we know that that's its nature, we'd rather see how we can put that fire to good use, right? To see what the benefit of that fire is, but we don't get angry at the fire for burning because we know that's the nature of fire. And the same goes for all the other elements. They have their own nature. We don't get angry at them. We don't get angry at the wind for blowing and so on. So it's saying we are in a reality as well. We are the nature. We are in a particular nature as well. It's called cyclic existence, and its nature is suffering. Right? So that's its nature. So there is no point in disliking or getting angry at suffering in cyclic existence because that's its nature. And so we have to see that if that's its reality, we can see there's actually no point in being angry or disliking that suffering, because that is its reality. And we, having been born into this again with contaminated set of aggregates of body and mind, which is also in the nature of suffering, can do no better than simply expect suffering to occur, and therefore to put our mind in place to be able to respond to it far more skillfully. And so this is the important thing, that if we do not want suffering, if we find suffering distasteful and undesirable, then we must focus on abandoning the causes of suffering. And indeed, when we look into what a fully qualified human being is about, and since we have that intelligence to actually look into matters in this way, not just to see them at face value, but to look behind and see that everything that arises has causes that leads to that point, and that and the fully qualified human being is therefore, their modus operandi should be to be able to use any situation, every problematic situation, to see what is beneficial in that situation, rather than employ dislike, which might lead to anger and so on. So, and in fact, when we look on it there, if you have simply a reactive human being who is reacting to every misfortune that arises in cyclic existence, even though it's the nature of cyclic existence to produce again and again this suffering and misfortune, if they're simply reacting with dislike and frustration and anger, one has to question just how fully qualified human being they are. And yesterday too, like I was saying last week, that beautiful verse that says, if you have an issue and you can do something about it, why, just go and do it. Don't be concerned about it. Just go and do it. And that if you have an issue and you can't do anything about it, well, what is the benefit of being frustrated and angry about it? There's no benefit, So this is kind of like real bottom line kind of advice.
산제의 송네 쇠샤와 산제의 쇠샤와 다 군조의 쇠샤와 되네 가야만 그 내적을 로 당하는 거 돈에 먼저 대화 주다는 동네 세다 지고르면도 뒤 멤버 돈에 전에 거서 동네 세도 말에 대화 주도 말에.
And so, like from that point of view, then when we are, whatever arises for us, be it happiness or suffering in this reality, we are able to look at it clear, see the actuality of what's going on. Therefore, we can work skillfully to eradicate the suffering because we're aiming at the causes of it. We are doing the best we can to experience the happiness because we are concentrating on causes that bring that about. And so there is therefore, in theory, nothing undesirable that arises for us, because whatever it is, we can deal with it skillfully. You know, and that should be seen as a natural law. This is not just the way it is because the Buddha said so, or God, or any other deity has pronounced it so. But this is the natural way of things. You know, this is just a natural, skillful response to life. And so to gain conviction in this approach, to really put our effort into this approach, to continuously familiarize with this approach is, you know, the most best thing we can do with our life. This is looking into eradicating suffering, looking into establishing happiness for ourselves as best we can, to being able to develop this habit of application and skillful thinking is, you know, the best way we can live a life. This is the actual Dharma. This is a fully qualified practitioner at work.
Secret was a miss in a Teshidao secret was me, the subject of the med secret was like you are. Tinanda Copas that Dunga younger was. A quite junior was. Quite ancient was. What a Caso de Diligent Caso shocked of the Mateva channel, didn't words in Betone, and it was a Mikey of my could do to get document on a course.
And so, you know, this is the best kind of habit that we can really take on for us now. So it really is, you know, the heart of the issue. And indeed, you know, for our children, our children's children, to be able to see that example is so important. To be able to assimilate into our life, our way of life, this organic and natural eradication of suffering, this organic and natural establishing of happiness for ourselves, and to realize in moments of, you know, depression or down, that this is the nature of where I'm at. This is fire. Fire's nature is to burn. You know, cyclic, the existence nature is to cause suffering. I'm not surprised, I'm not shocked. I'm just going to apply something skillful to overcome this situation. So one has this much more mature kind of attitude to life and be able to do that. And so this is it's so important, you know, that we have then this kind of like much sharper focus on what is it that eradicates suffering? What is it that establishes happiness? And to kind of really put our effort and dedication into that.
facilities charge yard do cheto ani labra yabol ta da lobjon yabol te cheden yabol che de chi yorba so da di ge chbo re labra yabol ta le dige de ge chbo de ina ya ma ama de chi kaso de komshi korala 동에 규카르샤 대외 규카르샤 안디 ngotwe to na dia chi kaso de da 지금 소소게 아니 데이터 투베 냠내 야고지 제토이나 아니 소소 부고 디 부고 전다 이래지도 검시라 파잔 치바이나 가서 부고게 다 지금 개개 당고도 파마 차대요 봐 아니 파메 검시라 디 야고지 요와이나 부고래랑 수디 자전 아니 거지 마음 받달라 잠을린데나 문에 단에 지금 가서데 가서래다 지금 디기 두에다 동에세가 뭐유 내주다 투베 토네 아니 둑투에디 아니 지금 가서데 지금 가서래 데데 둑겐데 아니 마다 치바이나 아니 문에 단에 그 지금 마음발 잠리 시대 야고 차에다 아니 비다고 요이게 라고 숙차요 봐
And so from our point of view, you know, teaching our children, it's so important to provide that example of calm, of the skillful means of how to face the inevitable suffering and how to establish more happiness in life. And that, you know, it's important, and we are so concerned about that, isn't it? We want the best for our children. We want them to go to school and to learn and to be successful in life, and to be successful in not having to experience suffering and wanting every happiness for them. I mean, this is the hope for every parent for their children. And so we want to give them the tools and the facilities to best be able to do that. And so it's kind of like really for the parents to really to recognize and to practice themselves these means of dealing with suffering in a very calm and skillful way of really doing one's best to establish the causes of happiness, and to teach one's child to do that, to make it a habit in their lives. And after all, the first teacher of life is one's parents, isn't it? And so if they are calm, then the children will learn that, will kind of like take that on. And so if that relationship of parent and child in as it is described becomes more and more prevalent in the world, and then we can logically have a much greater hope for more peace in the world in the future.
소소 게르그 토네 아니 지금 냠레 비다고 요에 뭐 여기 내주 토네 아까 냠레스네 게치 뭐 여기 내주 토마 줘야 되도 뭐 여기 내주 토마 토네 아니 대화 주다 뭐 여기 내주 토마 동네세다 추기 민다나다 마다나 가야 쳐봐면도 가서나 무슨 가네 동네세고도 대화 주고도 미스톨레이네 어 대화 고기 메시는 수카요 말 최켈레나다 최켈말레나다 가야 출루 가리인 바니 켜와 미수인 바이나 막 대화 되고 쓰래 동네 되고 문도 쓰래 그래 아니 그 추가 명이 연하면은 켜와면 다이나 그 대화 주게다 동네세 뭐 이거 내주 투베토네 대화 주게 뭐 이거 내주 투베토네 동네세 저거 뭐다 디 말해서 소속에 바 가서 저거 디냠 가서 워트 봐줘 워트네 아니 소속 냠솔레네 아니 냠뇽고 토네 아니 녀바 소토디 개쳐 버려 아니 디 토네 아니 밀레 미고야 고 자토가 이나
And so it really is all of our responsibility, isn't it, to really deal with life at its actuality, the reality of every situation, and to establish happiness and to eradicate suffering. And it's not necessarily you have to do so in the name of Dharma, in the name of Buddhism, in the name of anything. That we can. Everybody wants to eradicate suffering, and so whether we accept even this any spiritual tradition or not, you can ask anybody, and if they're honest, they want happiness, and they don't want suffering. This is foundational to everybody, and so it's kind of like if we then can respond to every instance that arises in our life in this reality by being able to see the actuality of the situation, to really see that we are, on the one hand, overcoming suffering by acting in harmony with reality, that we can establish happiness by acting in harmony with reality, and that we can recognize this way of doing things, and that we can practice that way, that we can then speak from experience, and that means then our example will have so much more import and impact when we're trying to teach others, and especially our children, etc.
나도 다 티스티서 개치지데 랑에 냠솔라네 미베도야 되도 파티 레베 딜레 개차데 랑게 디 tumba 냠솔라네 아니 미베스도 바이나 아니 파조부다 부이네 조고 조모이는 와시만 되게 솔토에스다 되게 요로 디 냠네 딜레 치도 딜레데네 디 콘르 슈차도 슈충도 조고도 아니 착단 슈충아도 어다데 지 가서 워트에 요긴 치고도 what way you could go to Dilatinity and it's Makiwa, Numatu, Kiwati, Mahatu, some such.
And so we should never underestimate the example of our own practice. That can be the most powerful of all, and not just for our children, but for our friends as well, for those who we come in contact with, maybe those who we work with. When we are observed to have less anger, more contentment, less attachment, and more satisfaction, these are things that people pick up on, and they are kind of interested to see then how that comes about. How are you so skillful at dealing with all the vagaries of life?
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of will leave it there for today. So I'm not I'm outside of my house at the moment. I'm in a different area, so I'll leave it there for today.
Yeah, well, that's all. Yeah, what the shit. Yeah, that Namju Nation Chen, Taka Rangi Chuol La, and Reta teacher, the Rata Kaja Tagishu and the Shed, Chikasore, Chik comes on quality to Kawaki or to Element by Inza, and Dilatene, that Dilata Tawajamato Tamatus, that Dilamatan Tamatus, calling Yamachin Yanjun Combaset, Yanjun Combaset, and the Dege Lot Rangi Chivola, and Pematamaki to so such a Chinanga chocolate, Chevana Udena to the Tuzan Yomaris, Kota Chova Samota, Kachakazam, Kota Chova Sam, then the Kachakazam, what a Kazam Samutane, what the nigger gave a lotti, and Rangichua Pema Tamaki Vetado, and you make him go Yaka Samota. Then at last, some time jagger to the Sunday Command to Matona Tomato Toba Chigi, some such comes the day to buy the language wall and Tariki one Yakonsa. But there's a Lama Ramboche, Tarichiwa Permetation, Kajichimo, Kusu to the Mudu, so the Chavalatena, and to get Nagajo, Lama Shajas and Yakute, and it Tambukas of Pet, Nibakos of Shoe, Sumako Tempio, Sanjay Komamato, the Chesu, some such, and Yala to my Mendeta Chavapi, so such a check, what a check.
And so Then we, as we normally do, then we focus again on the figure in the space in front and thus prepare the suitable seating arrangement on our own crown to look into the whole notion of this cyclic existence being in the nature of suffering, and that no matter what occurs, that it's kind of like that nature is kind of endowed with that nature. And so I want a sense of definite emergence from that reality. So developing that sense of renunciation, and that is symbolized by the lotus mandala seat. And then looking into all internal and external phenomena and putting them to that analysis, and we see that we arrive at the mere negation of the object of negation, that they do not have any independent existence or objective existence from their own side. And that notion of wisdom is symbolized by the sun disk mandala seat. And then the aspiration we have to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, that wish for the mind of enlightenment itself, is symbolized by the moon disk on that seat. And then we utter the invocation verse thrice. So, glorious and precious Ruku, come take a lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first recitation, the figure comes from the space in front onto our pre-prepared seat on the crown. The second, they have arrived there. Third recitation, we have the certainty that they will remain until we attain the state of enlightenment. And this brings forth a sense of joy. And then we offer the 7 limbs of practice and the mandala offering in thanks, in order to purify on the one hand and to accumulate positive merit on the other.
Dendeg lote ranging pema tabje chile juso samsa che ane chinang cho kndi chiba yiden joba ta tuso yomani samsa khona chowa kumba she ane dendeg niebe lote wa kasa wata de yiden joba tuso yomani wata de khona chowa kumba she wata de gaja gazam chig de lo sha ane dendeg niebe lote ning pema tabje de nime chibo nya ka juso samsa che 다 된대 임바 인자 아니 가서 쳐다도 되네 되네 좋아해 되네 좀 다슴제 탐제가 돈도 산제 고마 마도나 탐도 토바 지기 사서 고마시 되네 고마시 된대게 대 누원지도 마도나 지금도 사서 고마시네 아니 된대 가서다 두바디 아니 다위지 뭐냐 가와서 주네 아니 된님에다도 내소서 되네 반대 자발라 말로 뭐 다기 닌가 빼면서 거기 집으로 고소도 된 거도 자도서 되도서데 잡발라 되네 라니 지고 라마샤자 생겼대 아니 왜 이렇게 남바치가 생긴 남바치라는 지고는 뭐 전에 아니 더블 가서 니베 가서 수배 텐트셔나 산제 고마마도 뭐도 제수 소소 공부하셔 되네 배마다 게도 마인데 가존나 미닝네 단세 대가도 도치가고 생각과 제가 가게 뒤 타고도 또 배잖아 따에도 뭐는 마음서 따에도 뭐는 따에도 뭐는 뭐들이 나한테 리버스는 거 되네 제수 잡아야 그 순간 오마라 받잖아 디디디디도 오마라 받잖아 디디 리버스는 거죠 되네 되네가 오면 얘다 막 해도 막 샤만에 쏘지는가 리버스는 거 되게 치고다 장기 닝그 요소 라마샤자 생긴 내 요소서 어떻게
So then we begin the process of inviting Guru, the Guru Manindra Buddha, down to our heart center. But prior to that, we need to prepare a suitable seating arrangement. So again, we're looking into renunciation, being that state where we do not get beyond the suffering. So we want to kind of gain that definite emergence from renunciation. And that's symbolized by the lotus mandala seat that begins that seat. And then the notion of all inner and outer phenomena lacking any objective existence. And when we analyze into it, we see that they are, they're merely imputed by thought. They're lacking even the kind of the mere negation of the object of negation of it. And that produces the sun disk mandala seat. And then to understand that, that implies their lack of any independent existence, that points to the reality of their all phenomena having a dependent arising. They arise dependently, and this then puts in play the possibility of our being able to generating the causes to attain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. In other words, the mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta, and that is symbolized by the moon mandala disc. So then we utter the invocation verse again, thrice. So glorious and precious root guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. So we have the figure of our Guru Munindra on our crown, and at the end of the first recitation, it moves down into the central channel. At the end of the second recitation, has arrived at this pre-prepared seat, and at the end of the third recitation, we have again the certainty that the Guru Munindra Buddha will remain with us until we attain the state of enlightenment. Now the petals of the lotus fold over and are sealed at the tips by a white 5-pronged vajra. And then that package is surrounded by 3 mantras. The name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha in a clockwise direction, the mantra of Manjushri in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent arising in a clockwise direction.
What did it say? What did it say? And then Rangi was a Lama Shaja singing never did. And Kusum to the Vesetrin. Rangi Chivon, Kantika Palo Vesetra Valatana, Toma never departed towards the Kava to Ya Takaja, because of the Nigetu children the Kavala Soga Takaja. Tsetia Sengama Ting or Toma Mevalser, Mikichu children, the Kawata, Jeva Hanama, the Russian Hanama, never continues but Tashi Johnson, but Tashi Taba Johnson, and to Hado the Takaja Casola. So Tomba Kellan, yeah, Tomba Java the Kawata Urwata, so Tabe Tomba Kelleva, Judges about Tomba Kelleva, Samaga Tomba Kellene, and it the Gurua Kellene, and it Tsetia Sengama Ting, Amala Soba today, and it took a Tomba Kellene, and it took a sort of that, Chikotoba, La Casate, that Namjachi, Toba Yamusuma, to dig it, that dig what the Tiba Kadisha Sayun and never Kadisha Sayune. What that ticket can go, but that's Taba Yakusu, sounds what in a combat. Rota, what did it say? And Tagani Shake beat up with Yawala, so Lugi, that Nana such a young cake chickito, that Lugi nuts, chicken to give a Lugi nuts a second to me. Tagani Chusi could monova the cure, you know. Tagani Shake Toba Yavala, long tillated because of the liver to much and neck to get a Yambata. And get Chabatade, you know, to get Yambata the Yasu, Sata to get the Yamba to get the Yasu. What are the day that he let you get the Ya, San Shita? What did it check? And how don't know? New to Sunday Komatola, I get you more than Sana, Tamega Nashing. Get the car who you're Tamega Nashing, get the car in that car, and the Kanata the Tawalam Jabashi Chatwas. That you were short, your cousin. Jigging is a budget to a short jigging is what did call. What are the charts of what the commercial, the way you check to that the summer time? Not the bell better child, your mother, but when the member charts of that, Tamagana should go and shut the San Diego, Rangi, Ningo, Tomasha to the USA to the ticket and go Tamagana shaking up a gas and so. Tabaran Shapashi chat what it is to the way China, so what the commercial.
And so then the light rays start to emanate from the heart center of the Buddha within the lotus petals and permeates there and permeates through every atom of our body, from the crown of the head, excuse me, to the soles of the feet. And in doing so, purifies every single kind of instance, atom of negativity that we've accumulated since beginning this time, and all the obscurations that we have accumulated. We're dealing with all of the causes of suffering that we have accumulated from life to life to life to life, and they are purified, such as the 10 non-virtues, and all of the karmas related to that, and all of the actions that have been proscribed by the Buddha, and indeed all of the vows that we have taken on over all our lifetimes, be they the Pratimokta vows, the Bodhisattva vows, and the Tantric vows, and all the degenerations of those vows, all the faults and downfalls associated with those vows over the many, many lifetimes, are completely purified, and that we really have the all of that, all of what will render us in the best possible state for practicing Dharma. That is the eradication of all physical weaknesses and degenerations and illnesses, diseases, etc. They are completely purified, and all mental sufferings that can prevent us from perfectly being able to dedicate ourselves to the Dharma, they are completely and utterly eradicated as well. All of the four elements, any imbalances of those elements are rebalanced, and the channels, winds, and drops, wherever there's any fault or need in those particular aspects, are completely rebalanced and really fulfilled. And so we have kind of all of that, which is kind of like could act as an impediment to our perfectly being able to apply the Dharma, is completely and utterly purified. And particularly the debilitating effect of ordinary appearance, which prevents us from being able to quickly attain the state of enlightenment. And we put a stop to that, and we replace it with pure vision, pure appearance. And of course, we know we're operating here at the level of imagination and aspiration, but we make that strong determination in our own mind that yes, that I will put a stop to this kind of like this impure or kind of ordinary appearance, and seeing reality in its pure aspect.
Anta single connected the Tanga, Shawachas, never chose some what to the Kumbashi, and the Taranje, Tamega Nashi, the Dark Chichis, Tame Nashi, Kaba, Johnny, Tabara Japashi Chasu, got you choose the same days near to in that Pasa Kabaji Shagre. Pasa Kabaji Shagre. What are the Shani? Then Rangi Shindo to Lund in Yelencha, Lama Shajas good hedgy chicken, so to do the Lama Shajas and Kula Juices. So the Shindo to send the Lama Shajas to the hedgy chicken, so send the Lama Shajas to la Juices. And then Langi Luga is Lama Shajas, who's to go, even Juices, many for a juice something at some time. But to talk about not high much when it so the and they were they don't this way she gets something good for a just sometime. So, I don't know, there's a net here, no, you can't touch a gen, Lama Shaja singing again, but so Tabashi to do something, what did the commercial?
And so it's kind of very crucial that when we are doing this kind of visualization, and we kind of really understand that that we can really put a stop to this ordinary appearance, to make a kind of a very powerful kind of thus far, no further. This is it. I'm going to really see things in its pure way. I'm not going to see the faultiness in all of appearance. I mean, the kind of like through the blessing of Shakyamuni Buddha, I'm going to be able to really take this on and really, really determine it that all of I have really realized that every impediment of body and mind is now being completely eradicated. I am perfect state of body and mind to be able to see all of my reality from here on in its pure aspect and behave accordingly, you know. And so if, of course, as beginners, it's going to be very hard to sustain that. But to gain, like at this point in this kind of context, just that even a moment of really determining to do that is laying down a very powerful imprint on the mind, for it to be your natural spontaneous habit in the future. So it's really worthwhile doing that. And then through the combination of my own more subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of the Buddha. And then through the combination of my own more subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of the Buddha. And now I see myself and my body, speech, and mind as inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being. And to really feel that this has happened, I have no doubt that this has actually occurred. It's trying to gain that sense of having attained and taken that result onto the path. And then from there, one feels this sense of bliss, which combines with voidness, and we abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
아니 랑내서 내가 라마 샤자 생기 아니 지금 답을 신도 교수 섬서 라마 샤자 생기 고소도다 뭐 예매 교와티 데 나라라 신내가 콤바치 아니 데 두가라 라마 샤자 생기 빠도 내가 주네 아니 지 감송 그 좋아를 좀 탐절업에 아니 차상어제데 아니 티발라 때네 대다 탐제게 라마 샤자 생기 꿀라 람지 교 아니 대다가 내그 뇌디게 뇌기 교원 탐제 단 라마 샤자 생기게 답을 신도 교수 서 어다 그러다 코아 앱져서다 감소 코아 탐제다 동네 아니 지금 대다 탐제 답을 신도 그 내다다 답을 신 주가 선제 되가 탐제다 아니 라마 샤자 생기도 뭐 예매 주네 어디데 교수 어다 선제 탐제근도 산제 고마 주네 선제 탐제 산제 살아 코빈스다 니마 드린 그것도 소다 야고 쉬우 주수 서서 어디데 공부하셔 아니 선제 탐제 산제가 살 산제 고마토바 디지털한 게 아니지 가서다 냠내 제와 삼도당와도 최초가 냠내 제와체 아니 대두고 소소도 제와가 유대나 말로 똑같이 파다다는 그래서 디대와제 대외 동반 대돈에서 시켜서 서로 어떻게 공부하셔.
And the place that we have been in, of course, that's transformed into the enlightened abode of a Buddha. And then from seeing myself as a fully enlightened being, but also understanding of lacking any inherent existence whatsoever, I send out light rays from my heart center, equal in number to all the sentient beings in all the three realms of existence. And as those light rays dissolve into them, and they fulfill the path completely, spontaneously arise as enlightened beings. And their place as well is completely cleared of all fault and transformed into an enlightened, pure realm. And so here we have this certainty of having really, fulfilled that emptied, all of the three realms of existence of sentient beings, and all been placed into the pure realms of enlightened beings, that we have attained the state of leading all sentient, staying the goal of leading all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment. I realized that the leading of all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment, the merit that has facilitated that, and myself as the agent of that merit, all three are lacking any objective existence whatsoever, are merely imputed by thought. That from this understanding, I experience the bliss that combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
Water, that some of the nobody is on the summer down, Munakola, that they said that Leo Marva, Yinaya, Dilatin, Takaji, because of Sol of Chibusa, the Pasa Kibachi Shagri. What are the lady do? What are the nigga? Marazu, me did that, me carries that's some jet Tamjay, some jet Sanja Kumal created. That is the Ran Sanja Kumaton Tamata. Ran Sanja Kumatomala, that you saw there, and Tony Nijin, which is a Lambula Majima, Tabio Marca. The name by Inzata. 다 먼저 가를 나타왔으나 가를 나타왔으나 연중다 장주선의 양답에 따왔으면 당가라 졸라 대통령 장교 요 말이다. 그러다 전달을 팀비 신고 요마다 장교를 깨요 말 왔다. 다들 연중 장세 양답에 따왔게 말았다. 배주 제국도 말아줘. 미유의 선제 탐자 산제 고마고 선제 산제 고마 도와라 나 산제 고마 나 산제 고마 도와 디교 연중 장세 양답에 따왔게 깨고. 다들 이마 인자 되게 이마 인자 다 rangi netan gres tunge chune dewa chune netan gre chawana sana tona dena ta kande chuwana nyenju jangsa yangda ba tawa ke tunye chaye gege je gyuru gyo sho samwa jeje.
And so, of course, we're operating at the level of imagination and aspiration here now, but we should be left in no doubt as to the sincerity of our dedication, that we have accumulated great deal of positive merit. We're added to that collection of positive merit. But also, we should rededicate ourselves here to being able to, really establish the causes of attaining enlightenment, to increase our depth of love and compassion and understanding us, particularly developing renunciation, the mind of enlightenment, and the wisdom, the correct view of emptiness is so important. And that here, to take every effort that we can to really give it everything to establishing these particular causes when it comes to whatever arises for us, be it suffering or happiness. And this is where we place our aspirational prayers, that whatever arises for me, be it suffering or happiness, may it all immediately be seen as conducive conditions to add to my understanding and realization of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the realization of emptiness. You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure, compassion not ended through existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception, Sankapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, Roshan Drakpa at your feet, I make request.
Also, Toche, everyone, thank you. Okay, take care. No, Toche, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gela. Thank you, Gela. Thank you, Noel.